You don't have to be a writer to be an author. Most of us are actually already sitting on all the content that we need for a book. Like, who are you not to share your lessons? I believe everybody has a book in them because everybody has lessons that they have learned probably the hard way.
Welcome to Homegrown CEO, the podcast for entrepreneurs, leaders, and business builders seeking actionable insights to grow their ventures and themselves. I'm your host, Matt Colborn, and today we're opening up the book on reading, writing, and why it still matters for your business. We'll soon be joined by Gillian Whitney. With 6 books under her belt already, Gillian knows all about the challenges, blockers, and opportunities that come from being a business owner turned author. Now, a full-time book coach, she's a pro at turning what you know into a tangible business asset. So whether you have a book in mind already or can't even imagine how you could publish a title of your own, she'll share her best advice to help you uncover the book hiding within and the power it has to welcome new and exciting opportunities. Please welcome Gillian to the podcast. Now, tell me, a lot of business owners are creating a lot of content, and they're doing that constantly from videos and podcasts, LinkedIn posts, and my favorite, TikTok. Why does a book still stand apart from that?
I think because books have durability in terms of, social media can just disappear in 24 hours. You do a post up on TikTok or LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever you want to be, and now it's X. But that has such a short shelf life. But a book lasts forever. So like if you go to Amazon, a book is still there. And I buy books that are years old. It doesn't have to be the latest and greatest and new bestseller. A book stands the test of time. And, hey, I'm not putting TikToks in storage. I'm putting books in storage, which just shows the durability of we respect books and we treat books differently.
So the respect of books is an interesting thing to say, because I think often when we're having conversations with people and then it moves to your substance and authority as a subject matter expert, how much does having a book in your repertoire kind of change that conversation with people when you're being considered for opportunities, business opportunities, speaking opportunities?
I think a book sets you apart. It gives you so much credibility. I think people respect that you have done a book because so many people want to write a book and not many people actually do it. There's a lot of people that would like to do a book, but not many people that have written a book or authored a book, because you don't always have to write a book to author a book. But for the most part, books will give you that credibility that, hey, this person, they did the thing. They did the hard work, the heavy lifting to write the book, get it published, get it out there. And then you got to promote it. And so I think we admire people because of that. And I often think of people that maybe are going for the same position, like they want to speak at a keynote, they want to be in a conference. The person, if everything's equal and they're both, they got a great message, they got, great speaker reels, that they're both going to be good speakers. The person with the book will usually win out because people will just see them as having more influence and more expertise.
And what does that look like for you as an author yourself?
Oh, well, I have found that as soon as I wrote a book, people admired me more. And it was like, I got my first international speaking gig when I got a book. And I don't like to think that it was a coincidence. It rose me up to the top. And it was just a wonderful feeling. And I know anytime I go anywhere, people are just like amazed. And the biggest deal is when somebody actually asks you to autograph a book and you're just like, I'm not John Grisham. You're just like, it's a really humbling experience, but it's a thing. It really is the thing. So I have found it has opened new doorways for me. People automatically see me as an expert. And I think as a book coach, I have to have written a book because otherwise, how could I coach you on something that I haven't done myself? So I think for someone in my line of work, it was a must.
So you're quite an accomplished author now with multiple titles. How long did it take you to get the first book out of you?
A long time. It took me 21 years. It took me 21 years. And it's not because I'm a slow typist. I really am. But see, what I had done was for 21 years, I had been wanting to write a book. So I was like those people that dream about it, talk about it, have the half finished manuscript, and then they kind of they lose their steam, and then they go make another one and another one and another one. And the next thing I know, 21 years later, I'm the queen of unfinished manuscripts. And I'm just kind of going oh my gosh. But when I finally made the decision, and if you want, we can talk about that later. But when I finally made the decision, this has to go from hoping to doing. I have to take action. Once I did that, I actually wrote the book very, very quickly, probably within, I would say maybe within 6 weeks. And then I got the book published, self-published. And after that, I was so excited. I was next, what other manuscripts? And within 3 months, I had my next book out. So you can go from 21 years to boom, the next one was done in 3 months. So it's an amazing thing when you make the decision to take action.
And how many books have you written now, Gillian?
Six.
Okay. That's amazing. You're really starting to get some rhythm going to it after all that time getting started. What's your advice to people that are in a similar position to you before you got the first book published, that are just trying to get that first one out in their first 21 years?
Stop overthinking it and probably take a step back and find out what it is that's the obstacle for you. What's holding you back? It's like an anchor, and you're trying to move forward, but you got this anchor that's pulling you back. And for me, the anchor was I kept thinking my book had to be everything, like the giant tome, War and Peace. And I was writing a book about video because I was a video coach at the time. Okay. And I thought, I have to wait until I know everything. I have to be the expert of experts of experts. And then my book has to, actually have everything. That's a reference manual. That's not helpful for people. People don't want to know everything. They want to know, how can you solve my problem? So dial it down and figure out what's the one thing that somebody's struggling with, and how can you take them from here to there? What's the bridge? Your bridge is the book.
Some people underestimate how valuable that finished book can be as a prospecting tool as well, rather than just a publishing milestone. Talk us through, how does that actually work in practice? Well,
first of all, you don't really make any money writing a book. People think, I'm going to retire and, I'll put my book up and it'll be wonderful. If you make any money, that's awesome. But most business professionals were using it as a marketing asset. So it becomes a marketing tool. So when you have that mindset, then you write the book for your prospective client of what's the step that I want to skip in the process of moving my clients through my funnel. And so to me, what I did for my last book, which is called What Book Should I Write? I took all my discovery calls because I was ready to work with all these people. Yeah. And I'd get on a discovery call and they'd be like, well, I can't decide between this book or this book or this book or this book. And I just went, I need to write the book that stops that, and I can just give it to them. So that's literally a prospecting tool. So, it's a prospecting tool I can get paid for. So now people can go get the book on Amazon. They can get the ebook. They can get the paperback. It's 100 pages. You could read it in a flight. Okay. And then we can quickly move to the next level, working together, because the book has done the first step for me. So that's what I think people should do, is think about when you begin to work with a client or the prospective client, what's that first step that you're just if only we could move quickly beyond this phase, we could really get to some great work. That's what your book can do.
So that's an interesting concept to talk about. Just to elaborate a little bit more on that further, what do you think the smallest, most practical version of that is that someone could put together and start seeing benefit of moving their prospects through their pipeline stages faster?
Well, you could truly pull it back and think of it as a lead magnet. So
Okay.
many of us create lead magnets for our newsletter, our email newsletter or something like that. And I've helped people take that, maybe 10-page PDF and then
Okay.
turn that into a book because we can do that. So what I'd say is that first step is think about who you compete with. Who are your competitors? How are you different than them? What is it that you do that's the sort of secret sauce that makes you different from everybody else? Now think of your ideal customer and say, okay, what are 3 things that I could help them with that I can do? So, for instance, when I was a video coach, I thought, okay, the most important thing that people have as a problem is how to feel comfortable on camera. So it wasn't, all the big things about video. It was that one thing. And so then I thought, well, what are 3 things I could help people with to get them to be more comfortable?
Right.
Well, that was a lead magnet. Well, actually, it was a video series. And then I turned that into a book. So sometimes think really, really small. Could you make a video about it? Could you make a 3 video series about it? Or could you just make a lead magnet?
Yeah.
That's the first step. And then expand on it.
So most people are sitting there quite daunted. You've got a blank page in front of you, now even a blank screen in front of you. What do you tell them instead?
Well, this is sort of what I alluded to earlier. You don't have to be a writer to be an author. And most of us are actually already sitting on all the content that we need for a book. If you have done a course, an online course, if you've written blog posts on your website, or maybe you've been a guest on podcasts, that's a gold mine of content that you're already sitting on. That's your expertise. And so what you need to do is take that expertise and then repackage that into a book.
Okay.
So a lot of times we don't need to start from the blank screen with, day one. And, so many people think we have to go to a mountain cabin and, sit with a typewriter or something. That's like in the movies if you want to write fiction novels. But if you want to write a business book, you probably already are about 2/3 of the way there with your pre-existing content.
Okay. And then from there, what's the concrete next step?
You want to look for themes.
Okay.
And so what I suggest people do is look through your content and begin to read through it. And this is where you can get AI to help you.
Okay.
AI is a wonderful tool to assist you. And you could literally feed all of that content into AI. So if you've been on a podcast, get the MP3 and have that transcribed. So you've got the written transcript. Same with if you have videos, get those transcribed. So you've got the written text. You could upload that to AI, and it doesn't matter, ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, it doesn't matter what you use. And then you could say, what are some common themes that are coming out of all of these different forms of content? And here's the important thing. Know what your goal is. What do you want to write a book about? And then if you fed that into the AI and said, okay, I want to write a book that's going to attract more clients. This is my business. This is my content. Help me bring this together. It can see those patterns for you. And that can give you a really good base of where you should start. And then you can even say, okay, that looks good. What are some holes? What are some content gaps that I have here? Can you help me, put together a table of contents? Have AI work as that assistant for you to get the whole book outlined.
I love hearing about how AI can be an effective tool in the book production process. Where should people be careful of their use of AI?
Okay, you want to be careful that AI does not become your ghostwriter.
Okay.
You want it to be your administrative assistant. And AI, sometimes you have to really give it some boundaries. AI might make some suggestions, okay, your book, it's chapter 7, it's really light. You could use some case studies. And you go, okay, so then I'll go back and get some case studies. I'll look at my clients. What would be the danger is if AI said, let me make some case studies for you. and then start putting it in, because that's not your clients. That's not your experience. And you don't know where AI is pulling that from. So you might say, well, that sounds really good. Well, what if AI pulled that out of somebody else's book? And the next thing you know, somebody says, hey, did you know Seth Godin actually had that whole story in his book and now it's in yours? Ugh, that's going to kill your credibility. So I think the stories, the case studies, your voice, it has to be you. Don't outsource that to AI.
So you've got people with a lot of experience. They've got the stories, the case studies, they're subject matter experts, but they still don't consider themselves a writer at all. Can they still author a book?
Absolutely. Because if you have the gift of gab, if you're able to talk, you can actually author a book. Because nowadays we just pick up our phone, we can talk into our phone. So if you're the kind of person that it's like, oh, if I sit down blank, nothing comes to me, writer's block, I can't do it. Maybe you're walking your dog, you could talk your book and just, little snippets of, oh, I have this idea of, oh, let me tell you about this. And then just get all that stuff recorded and then again, have it transcribed. Another way is, and this is some of the work that I do with my clients, is I'll interview them. So we decide what their book is about. And because I'm a podcast host myself, I know how to interview people. And so we'll figure out, here's some of the content gaps that we want to put in the book. Sometimes here's the whole book. Maybe they don't have pre-existing content. They're new or they're pivoting their business or something. So we can go ahead and have set questions that we're going to ask. And then I know to keep teasing out the stories. And then that can be the content for the book. So you definitely do not have to be a writer to write a book, but you do need to be an expert. And there's even an exception for that.
Well, it sounds like it's never been easier to write a book from when you set out to write your first one 21 years ago. What actually stops people from finishing a book? And is it usually what they think it is?
I think that it's really about fear. So people will label that a lot of reasons. Busyness, people tell me, oh, I'm too busy. I'm too busy to write a book. And when it slows down, I will. And I tell people, you'll never find the time to write a book. You have to steal the time. Meaning steal it away from Netflix, steal it away from other things that are occupying your life. And that's why, I'll work with people and I'll say, okay, but we could get on a Zoom call. Could you find time for a 1-hour Zoom call? Because we could get a ton of content. And they're like, oh yeah, I always have time for a Zoom call. That's easy peasy. But it's that fear of, committing yourself. It's easier to say, I'm writing a book. Everybody admires you. Oh, wow. He's writing a book. Isn't he awesome? But if you actually write the book, you're vulnerable. You put that book out there. What if people think it's horrible? So we're afraid of putting ourselves out there, but mostly it's fear, and it can just be wrapped up in procrastination, perfection. I don't have enough expertise. There's always reasons. But the thing is if you really think about your customers, you really need to write that book because they need your message. They need your message. And you know what? Your competitors are writing the books. And that actually helped me get off my duff one day, is seeing a competitor writing a book. And I went, oh, they would do a terrible job. I knew they would do a terrible job. Their content was horrible. They had a terrible, they weren't a giver. They were a taker. And I went, I need to beat them to it. So sometimes competition is a great motivator.
Oh, judgy, Gillian, as my daughters would say. Now, has that ever been your own experience that you've had a project that you've kept starting but you couldn't bring yourself to finish?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many things that, my biggest thing is probably my newsletter. It's like having an email list is like one of those things where it's like, I'm just overthinking it and taking it too long. So I am not perfect in any way. And I probably should just get on with it. But I have 100 reasons to not do a newsletter. And, I sympathize with people because I know when we don't want to do anything, any excuse will do.
Yeah. I think a voice that people often hear in the back of their head is that, who am I to write about this? This is a topic that's been written about before multiple times. The world, my audience, doesn't need another one about this. How do you help someone quieten that down?
Well, I give them the opposite. Who are you not to?
Right.
Like, who are you not to share your lessons? Because I believe everybody has a book in them, because everybody has lessons that they have learned probably the hard
Mm,
way. And you can lessen the learning for someone else. And if you have that mindset that you say, if one person could be helped by me writing this book, then I have done some good in the world. Just having that mindset. And the thing is that a lot of times we have learned something and we're actually writing to yesterday you, yesterday me.
mm,
But we're so close that we remember it's what it was like to have that pain. I still remember what it was like to not be able to, every year I would say, by the end of this year, I'm going to have a book. And I'd say that in January, and December would go around and I'd say, how did another year go by? And I would feel it in my stomach. I still feel that. Even though that's not my story anymore, I'm still close enough to know that. Whereas somebody who is at a higher level
mm,
than me, they don't remember that. Maybe they
yeah.
never even experienced that. So if you are sitting there thinking, who am I to write a book? Who are you not to? Because you have such a gift that you could be helping somebody with your message.
Well, we couldn't agree more. That idea of shared experiences is exactly our philosophy here at Homegrown CEO. Is there a frame or a reframe even of a practical exercise that you've seen work consistently for people stuck in that mindset?
I love podcast guesting, looking
Mm,
at your podcast guesting experiences. And I actually know a few people who say, I never listen to my podcasts. Like if I've been on a show, that's it. I don't even listen to when it comes out. I'm the opposite. I love it. I lean into that because, in my opinion, that's your best stuff. And you listen to podcasts and you're just like, holy cow, how smart am I? Especially if it's audio. Because when you do video, if you're watching a video podcast, for the most part, you're sitting there going, "Ugh, I can't believe I wore that outfit and my hair." And, we put ourselves under the
yeah.
microscope with video. We don't do that with audio. And when we listen to ourselves on audio, we're just like, dang, I really, nailed it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a confidence
Mm.
booster. And again, if you listen to yourself, you'll say, I have a lot of wisdom that needs to be shared. I have to just get over myself. And that I've actually told people, let's take those guest appearances and turn them into chapters. And they're just like, wow, I do sound smart.
No, I love that. Yeah, just getting past yourself. What's the smallest version of starting that you'd recommend to someone who's just been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off? So I'm not talking about trying to finish it. I'm just talking about getting it started.
Getting it started. Again, I just go back to thinking about, you know, look through all of the stuff that you do with your clients. What
Mm,
are the questions that come up over and over again? And which one excites you? Which
right.
one is like, I love answering that question because it just excites me so much. And take that one thing and think about, okay, what's their problem and how
Mm,
could I solve it? And just write that one thing. Just write that one thing. And then maybe here's a little
mm,
exercise. I'm just kind of doing this off the top of my head. Feed that up into AI and
okay.
just say, what else could go with this? What other questions
Mm,
could go with this? And then think to yourself, could I answer that? Sort of like in a podcast,
yes.
if you ask one question and there's follow-ups, do that exercise yourself and see if there's more to it than you realized.
So what's a common mistake you see when you start working with a new client on their book?
Two things.
Mm,
One, they are putting everything but the kitchen sink
yeah.
into their book. They're just making it too big. So that's one mistake. But the biggest mistake is thinking that you're going to write for everybody. Everybody
Yeah.
needs your book. And that's not true. You have to zero in. And people are afraid of that. They're afraid. It's like, well, but I want all these clients, and it's the same thing with having an
Mm,
ideal client. It's like, well, everybody could take advantage of my services. And it's like, no, not really, not really. And the thing is if you zoom in to the specific person, and I always like to kind of think of it as a bullseye. You're heading for that red center, that
yeah.
dead center. Maybe other people will pick it up that aren't in that dead center, but you're going for that dead center, that little bullseye. And then really think about who they are. And I don't mean demographics, I mean the psychographics.
Mm,
Is it somebody who's, new starting their career, or somebody who's doing a second act? So it's like people, 50, 60 years old, or people that are 20. Think about, is it people that suffer from this? Is it introverts, extroverts? Really get clear on who that is, because when you write a book,
mm,
you want to envision that ideal person on the other side. So sometimes I'll just
mm.
say, I'm writing this to my friend Sue,
Okay.
because I know Sue needs this message. And then that way it's conversational. So don't write to everybody, because everybody is not your audience. And that is probably the biggest mistake, writing to everybody.
Oh, I love that one. That's great advice. Now, someone that's sitting down this week to work out what their first book is actually about, what are the first few questions they need to be able to answer before they write even a single word?
Well, the first thing is, what's the goal? What do
Okay.
you want this book to do for you? Because later you're going to have to put your marketer hat on. And so it's really good to be a marketer from the get-go, because if you can't figure out how you're going to market this book, it might not be the right book for you. So that's really, really important. So think about, what's the goal? What is it going to do for you? Because sometimes a book will be like, oh, I got a great idea for a book, but it's actually not going to help me in my business. So is this the book I should be writing? And that one, maybe that gets shelved for another day. Maybe you do that when you
Yeah.
retire or something like that. So what's the goal? If it's a business book, how are you going to use this in the business? Is this something that would help your prospective clients?
Mm,
Would it help them after they work with you, before they work with you? Really think about what that goal is. So that's number one. Number two would be, what is the ideal client? Who is this for? And then think about, what is the problem that that ideal client has? What is keeping them up at night, and how can you solve it? So kind of doing those three things is what you should do before you write a book, because I have still lots and lots of books
yeah.
all sitting in my to be written list,
Yeah.
that it's not the right time, because you want the intersection of a Venn diagram with those three things, and then something in the sweet spot right in the middle. And if you only have two, it's not enough. And one is certainly another day.
Now, Gillian, you've given us some great advice today. Thank you. To help sum it up, what we've spoken about, what are three pieces of advice or lessons that someone should take forward from this conversation today?
I think that, first of all, recognize that you should write a book.
Mm,
Everybody should write a book. And if you're a business professional, it's just going to put you up to the next level. So it's going to help you in so many ways, but it's also going to help people that you work with. So it's a win win for you, and it's a win win for them. So, first of all, make that decision. Yes, I can do this, and I have value to share. The next thing that I would say is, make sure that you begin to look through all of your content. Do a content survey. Go on a treasure hunt of everything that you have, and look through your website. What kind of blog posts do I have? Look through your podcast appearances. There might be people that are saying, I don't even know what podcast appearances I've been on. Go Google yourself. Go to Apple and search your name and find out all the podcasts you've done. Go through your YouTube channel, do
mm,
that treasure hunt and find your content. And then really start to brainstorm, just walk around with your phone and say, what about a book about this? What about a book about that? Just allow yourself, give yourself permission to just start thinking outside the box, and really think about, what do my clients need? What's the what's the book they need? Because it's not about you, it's about them.
Before you go, Gillian, we'd love to hear what we call your kitchen bench moment. So looking back, what would you say was a major turning point in your career and one experience that totally shaped your business or your mindset going forward?
Well, I actually have two, so
Okay.
I don't know which one to choose, but I would think that probably it was when I was on a podcast and I was being invited to recommend books on a podcast. And the podcaster actually said to me, please feel free to share your own book, because I know everybody has a book, these days. Everybody seems to have a book. And I think that just hit a chord with me
Yeah.
of like shame, and shame is a horrible thing, but shame. And like, I felt like enough, I cannot do this. And I went on that podcast and I was cheerful and recommended other people's books, because if you can't recommend your own, at least recommend people's who you know. And I was able to do that. But something flipped in me and said, no more, Gillian, no more. Stop kidding yourself. Either decide, sort of like Yoda, do or do not. There is no try. And I made that decision. And then I said, now how do I put this into action? And I made a plan of action and I did it and I followed through and I committed. And I think that now not only expands to the books, it's anything I do is you have to make that commitment. You have to burn the boats. And I think that's the most important lesson. It's like, stop wishing. And, we can wish forever. We can dream forever. You have to make that decision 100% to do it. So that was a huge turning point for me.
Your latest book is What Book Should I Write? And we'll link that in the show notes. Gillian, thanks for joining us. You've inspired me to keep going on the next chapter of my own book.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Maybe you've been toying with the idea of writing a book for a while now, or perhaps this has inspired you to explore what that might look like for the first time. Whatever your situation, remember these words from Gillian. Everyone has a book in them. So ask yourself, what will yours be? Thank you for joining us today on the Homegrown CEO podcast. I hope my conversation with Gillian has given you some confidence and inspiration to get started on that next chapter. Do let us know if that's the case. A review of this podcast goes a long way in helping other people find us, and we'd love to hear from you through the email address below. You can get in touch at any time. And if you're hungry for more, become a member of our exciting Homegrown CEO community. You'll be able to connect with Gillian herself and dozens of other exceptional entrepreneurs, and you'll receive access to exclusive bonus content from our conversation today. You can click the link in the show notes to join us at a discounted rate. Until then, make sure you subscribe to the show to be the first to know when our next episode drops. We look forward to you joining us then. In the meantime, I'm your host, Matt Colborn. Now, go start writing.